Friend, this guy here has such a fantastic reputation in his family, and Peter McPheeters.
Hope I can live up to that. Hope I can live up to that. Yes, I can. Thank you, Paul.
Yep.
Wow. Thank you all for being here. I want to start by saying that I am not an historian. I'm a collector of old pictures, and I like to try and figure out what's on them. And sometimes I get it right, and sometimes I make it up, and I'll leave it up to you to find the difference. But feel free to heckle or interrupt or correct me anytime you see an error, because it's a work in progress and it's kind of fun. I'll also, before I start, I want to just cite some actual sources, books that if you don't have them, you should, because they're all very interesting. The Shores of Saco Bay by J.S. Locke, Gleanings from the Sea by Joseph Smith, The History of Biddeford and Saco by Folsom, and also I was just reading Margot Alley's brand new book called Outgoing Tide, which she just brought me a copy of yesterday, which is a lot of fun. I actually have some new stuff in here today from that. One more bit of preface and then I'll get going. I'm going to be skipping around a little bit, both geographically and chronologically. I'm going to try and follow some semblance of an order, but it's impossible to get it perfect. So bear with me, and hopefully you can figure out where I am. We're starting actually with the Curtis Farm Hotel, which the road that those ladies are on right there is what's now Pool Road, or Route 9. Fortune's Rocks Road comes out right about here. So if you look at this carefully, I'm going to show you a picture of this house, which still exists. The Curtis Farm Hotel was built was started in about 1872. I think the old farmhouse is older than that. But the hotel was started in 1872 by William Curtis, who lived in Granite Point on Bracket Point. Curtis Cove was named after him. And it was sold later to Charles Tanner. Charles Tanner ended up owning and running 4 inns in Fortune's Rocks, I think, and I'll show you all of them. So it was called Tanner's Inn from 1923 to 1941. In 1941, a fire burnt that structure, and I think the barn back there. And here's another picture of it. So this is what remains. And this is what burned in 41, and the whole thing was the Curtis Farm Hotel and then Tanner's Inn. And this is what it looks like today. So you might recognize it. So this is the house right sort of at the end of, actually at the end of Granite Point Road. This barn was built after the fire of 47 by Lynn Thomas, who used to live over on Guinea Road. He was sort of the most important contractor around town at the time, built with timbers that had burnt in the fire. So from there, we're going to move down to what is number 8, and the casino, and the bowling alley, and the Cove Crest Inn over here. So we're coming down Fortune's Rocks Road. This is Route 9 here. We're coming down Fortune's Rocks Road toward the water and Lily Pond. And as you go down that road, as you went down that road before 1947, you would have seen these buildings. This is the old Fortune's Rocks Casino, which I'll get to in a minute. This is the Hotel Rocks, or Tanner's Inn it was called. Charles Tanner again ran this hotel. This was another hotel that is unidentified. I was reading a history actually written by Bob Shaw, who lived in Fortune's Rocks, who actually had a house here after everything burnt down in 47, and he knew it was a hotel, but he couldn't identify the name of it. The casino was built on land donated by Charles Tanner and Louisville Emmons, who was probably also the builder of it. The Emmons family was big in the area here and in Kennebunkport. There were bowling alleys, there was a bowling alley, dances, plays, movies, and a lot of the local kids worked there, their first summer job, that sort of thing. In 1947, Louisville Emmons, I think, son owned what was called the Emmons Farm, which is the second house on the right after you go across the Kennebunkport line. Big old white farmhouse just down there in the hollow after the Little River. And he was very much afraid that the fire was raging in other parts of Biddeford and York County, and he was afraid that his house was going to burn down. So he moved all his furniture in here, and it burned down. His house was saved. His house was.
Peter, you said we could ask questions. Just quickly, casino. Can you explain to them what
A
that
casino was not a gambling establishment. It was a place of entertainment. It was a place where you might go, have a dance or go bowling or, maybe play cards or something like that. But it wasn't a gambling casino per se. Pretty common name actually for places back at that time.
So what year is that?
This was built in 1902, roughly, and it burned down in 1947. Along so much of Fortune's Rocks in 1947. Here's another picture of it. So this is Fortune's Rocks Road. Looking back at this is Route 9 out here. These buildings don't exist anymore as far as I know. And this is the driveway up to the Hotel Rocks, which I'll show you in a few minutes. This is a view looking from the cove. If you know Fortune's Rocks and you're on Neptune Lane, which I think is marked on this map, it's one of the little roads that shoots off of Fortune's Rocks Road after you go past the first cove. This is looking back, and this is the Hotel Rocks. This is the casino. So Fortune's Rocks Road goes out to Route 9 that way, and then this is the Cove Crest Inn, which I'll get to in a minute, and another unidentified inn. One thing I want to point out, the Hotel Rocks in this picture is this mansard structure. And it lasted, let's see here, let me come to that. The Hotel Rocks, original date unknown. It was built by Tanner and Emmons again. The rates in the early 1900s were between $8 and $12 a week. There were 3 different versions of this building. So this is the original mansard roof building right here. At some point, I believe in January 14th, 1915, it burned and was replaced with that building with these enormous peak roofs. So again, this is right on the backside of Lily Pond. This is number 8 on your map. So as you're going through Fortune's Rocks, going past the last pond, it's on the right-hand side across the pond. So something happened with this building at some point. I'm sorry, excuse me. The original building was altered to make this roof, and then in 1915, this building burned. You'll see there's a pattern here. There are a lot of fires, but it was a pretty cool building. So here's the casino again, and here's the Hotel Rocks, and the Lily Pond is right over here. This house is this is. I'll tell you the name of this house in a minute, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. This is a deep panorama taken from basically Old Kings Highway. So here's Hotel Rocks, here's Lily Pond, this is Fortune's Rocks Road going past the first Little Cove Beach. And then here's Fortune's Rocks Road heading down toward Biddeford Pool down here. Almost everything in this picture, I think actually everything in this picture burned in 1947. Everything. As I recall, there were 5 or 6 houses that survived the fire of 47.
So
Everything.
is that where Starkwood is?
Starkwood is right here.
That is.
Exactly. Yep.
Thanks, man.
Here's another view of it. This is probably taken from the top of the Hotel Rocks. So this was the bowling alley before the casino. And there's a fun history of this, which I will, so this is the bowling alley and wash house, built in 1880 by Warren Bryant. And this is a snippet from the Biddeford Soccer Journal in 1938. In part it says, in 1880, sociability was centered in the bowling alley in Fortune's Rocks. Mr. Bryant was responsible, and this was the Bryant house that I showed you over here. I'll get back, sorry, let me get back to it. This was Mr. Bryant's house right here. And then here's the bowling alley wash house. So Mr. Bryant was responsible for having the building transferred by ferry from the Saco side of the river across the river to the Biddeford side at Ferry Lane, and from here it was hauled by oxen down the Pool Road to the present location where the parts were assembled, the additions built, the second story added to the front, and a small section was partitioned off. This was the first store in Fortune's Rocks right here. The little store carried a small line of groceries and an assortment of candy. Mostly stick candy and round jawbreakers, plug tobacco and pipes. Also, spruce beer bottled in stone bottles. Bowling became very popular and dancing was a favorite pastime, music being furnished by an accordionist. During the evening, people in the cottages met at the alley to talk over the gossip of the day and to bowl and to dance. So after this ceased being a bowling alley, they built the casino, or the casino was probably a bigger version of it, bigger, more luxurious version. So
Catering began around what time are we talking?
this was built in about 1880.
1880.
Moved from Saco in about 1880, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then the casino was built in 1902. So here we are back at the Hotel Rocks. Here's the Bryant House in front of it. The Hotel Rocks, as you can see here, has now become a mansard roof building. So it went from Dambrel to those amazing Gothic, or I don't know what peaks, to this Dambrel, sort of more like what you might see today. So this was rebuilt after the fire in 1912, and you can see it kind of looks like it was just built in this picture. I love this little truck down here. Here's another shot of it from, this is across the pond as you're heading, well, after going this way, I'd be going towards Biddeford Pool. Another shot. So here is actually a piece of Starkweather's house, I believe. So the bowling alley is now gone, and the structure has been slowly started to be converted into a house. And the house, I actually worked on that house a million years ago, and there are pieces of it that are really, really old, so I suspect that pieces of this are still there. So here's the Hotel Rocks, here's the casino, and here's Fortune's Rocks Road going back out to Pool Road.
Sorry.
Yep.
So where is that? What beach is that?
So,
Beach?
no, this is that First Cove Beach.
That's the cove.
Yeah,
And then you
yeah,
see the ocean.
exactly, just before you head back out to Route 9. Yep. Another shot, same general angle. So you can see this car here heading out to Pool Street. And this is a little flyer that somebody gave me. It was an advertising me, and this is sort of unfortunate, but it's what was real at the time. I'll let you read it yourselves. I can't answer for it. So here it is again, and then 1947 happened, and this is what happened in Fortune's Rocks. The house that was built on the site of the Hotel Rocks later was called Chimney Hill because there was the remains of the chimney up there. That was all that was left up there. I'm not sure if it was right here or not, but I can tell you that this is the sign for Tanner's Inn, and these are the piers that the casino was built on, and that's all that's left. So, moving along, we are going to go now to Old Kings Highway right here, number 9, and I'm going to jump off of here for a second, digress, but first we're going to go to the Cove Crest Inn, which was built by Warren Bryant, or owned by Warren Bryant. Apparently was their house, and then eventually he converted it into an inn right here. And let's see here. In 1907, he sold it to someone named Edward Grove, who ran it as the Wayside Inn. And then in 1910, he sold it to good old Charles Tanner, who ran it as the Cove Crest Inn, aka the Tanner's Inn. He did light naming things after himself. So there's the Cove Crest. So this is on Old Kings Highway, which is the little dirt road that goes off to the left as you make the last corner going out to Route 9.
None of those are around it, right?
They all burned. This one actually burned, it disappeared before 47. I don't know what happened to it, but I'll show you in a second. This house did survive the fire. This is the house that was, I'll tell you the name eventually, it's in here somewhere. But this picture, this aerial picture, is taken sort of from Granite Point, or a plane over Granite Point. You can see here's Old Kings Highway. That Cove Crest Inn was right here. This is Tanner's Inn. Here's the casino. Here's Fortune's Rocks Road, Starkweather's house, that first Cove Beach, and then going down, down the line toward Mile Stretch. But you can see that the Cove Crest Inn is gone, and it's before the Fire 47 because the Hotel Rocks is still there. This is the way I do my history, it's just process of elimination. This little house right here is also still here. This is Polly Weaver's house, or was. She passed away recently, but she owned this house for her family's owned it for generations. Here it is a little bit more closely. Beautiful little cottage, 1 or 2 bedrooms just sitting up on the rocks. Polly Weaver wrote about the Bryants and the Cove Crest Inn. Actually, no, she writes about the house next door to hers, and let me go back to that in 1 sec. So she writes about this house, which was right next to hers, this house right here, saying that next door was the house that belonged to the Bryant's daughter, Hortense. She married Frank Bond, who built a house at the end of Old Kings Highway right there. This is where Brian Jones is now, and the Nichols family used to live. Those are the names I was struggling with. Anyway, about Frank Bond. Frank kept pigs and collected garbage for the feed, which was not great for the neighborhood. And during Prohibition, he was visited by U.S. Marshals more than once for making whiskey. All right, so here's another shot of Polly Weaver's house right here. This is the little houses on the rocks, and it's still there. It's the second house on the left on Old Kings Highway. It's a wonderful little house. And you see over here in the distance is what was called the Livingston Castle. This is White Neck on Granite Point, which now has 20-ish houses maybe.
Yeah.
This was what was there back then. Crawford Livingston was a tycoon with Hollywood connections. He was a friend of Charlie Chaplin's, allegedly. His family used it until the 30s. Here's another picture of it. Quite a house. And then something happened. Probably he may have lost his fortune. I don't know. But anyway, it was used until the 30s. It was basically abandoned. A guy named Spitz, whose first name I've forgotten, who bought up a lot of property around here in the 30s and 40s, especially after the fire. I actually bought some land from him after, not after the Fire 47, but land that he had bought after the Fire 47. Anyway, Spitz bought it for back taxes in 1940. The house was abandoned the whole time after that, I gather. It finally burned down in 1965 after decades of abandonment. The older kids that I knew used to go over there and drink beer. And that's probably how it burned down.
Just another point on that. It said that the cement that he used contained sand that had salt in it, and that it was not suitable for building, and that's why it started to deteriorate almost as soon as he built it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That actually wasn't terribly unusual to use this beach sand for masonry, and the chimneys would all deteriorate. So I've never heard that, but it makes sense. Anyway, this is an ad when it was for sale back in the 30s, or 28, excuse me. Pardon? It doesn't give a price. You have to ask, you can't afford it.
So it didn't burn down,
It burned down in 1960. No, the fire didn't go out to White Neck because there were no trees out there. You can see it's sort of barren. And actually, Granite Point, as far as I know, didn't burn. Fortunes Rocks did. Granite Point didn't. Biddeford Pool didn't. Go figure. Okay, so we are going to move on here to, so you'll see that there are 2 number 10 question marks here, because I used to think that the Hotel Panasol was here. The last time I did this talk, I was firmly corrected that it was here, and actually my friend Mike Swanton proved to me that it was here. In fact, so it was more or less between the end of Neptune Lane and the end of, excuse me, Ocean Spray Drive. This is the Hotel Panasol, and once again, it's our good friend Charlie Tanner. This time he was teamed up with a guy named Clarence Sawyer, and they named it after themselves, Tanasaw, get it? So you can sort of see, this is the end of Neptune Ocean Spray here, and you can look down, and here's Fortunes Rocks Beach down this way. And these guys are just out having a good day. Hopefully they're catching fish. It was built in September 9th, 1908. No, excuse me, it was built in 1907. It burned down in 1908 after two seasons. Tanner collected $20,000 of insurance. He rebuilt it, opened again on March 3rd, 1909. It burned to the ground on October 7th, 1909, and then that's that. So it had maybe, what, 3 seasons? So here's the original house, Kennesaw, and then it was rebuilt to look like this. You can see their name, and I believe this is Charlie Tanner's last hotel. Actually, that's not true. This is not, I'm doing this geographically, not chronologically. His last hotel was Hotel Rocks. So that's it for the Fortune's Rocks hotels, of which there were a legion. So we're now going to head down Fortune's Rocks Road. This is the former Troy house right here that was built in 1920. And you can see the old Fortune's Rocks bathhouse. That's where it used to be. A piece of it remained in 1978 and then was washed across the street into the tennis court and then moved to where it is now. I had the pleasure of rebuilding it after that. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's not a gin tonic. So now we're at the bridge. This is the old bridge on Bridge Road. Back before it was built by the concrete, Lightning's Bridge. So this area here, I don't know why it was called Lightning's Point, and it's still Lightning's Point Road. Don't know what that means exactly, but there's a couple of folks navigating under the bridge. And across the street from the bridge, some of you old folks might remember Boucher's and Whitecaps. Right, this is right at the end of Bridge Road. And then we move on to Biddeford Pool. This is a photo taken from Gleanings from the Sea, Joseph Smith's book, which has some beautiful old photographs. So this is, we've come off a mile stretch road, comes up here to the intersection of Orchid Boulevard. Yates Street goes up this way, and the community center would be right there. Every building in this picture, except for this one, still exists. This is the old Frank Hanlon house, and David Thompson lives here. This is the Colgate condominium house. And then this is one of the earlier versions of the CBUN, which we'll come back to, which is right at the top of the hill. If you know where I live, it's in my yard, in our yard. So we're going to talk about the ends of Biddeford Pool. These are just brochures from a couple of them. There's a table of stuff in the back that has these brochures and a bunch of other stuff, floor plans and rate schedules and things like that. So when you're leaving, you can have a look if you're interested. But we are going to start this on the end of Stonecliff Road. And on your map, so I'm moving from the Fortune's Rocks map to the Biddeford Pool map. And we're going to be looking at numbers 1, 13, 12. And so I'll just give you a brief overview because this picture, amazingly enough, shows 5 different hotels in Biddeford Pool. So this is Old Stock, which was originally called the Mansion House, which was the first inn in Biddeford Pool, run by Christopher Huzzy and his wife. After it was called the Mansion House, its name changed to Old Stock. This building was built as the Mansion House later. This is the CBU Inn that we just saw from the other angle, coming up Mile Stretch Road. This is Christopher's Pasture, which was run by the Huzzy family as well as an inn for a while. And then this is what was the Ocean View Hotel, now Marie Joseph Spiritual Center, and now, as you know, probably no closing. So here's Union Church here, just to give you an orientation, and the Abenaki Club clubhouse and the tennis courts and so forth. The beach is right back here behind the convent. This is another view, somewhat similar, but actually it's before this. So this picture was taken sometime between 1898 and 1905, because the Abenaki Club has started. It's got tennis courts, but it hasn't had a clubhouse yet. The original Abenaki Clubhouse was Christopher's Pasture here, which was also in previously, so we'll get to that. But the earliest inn in Biddeford Pool, and I think the earliest inn on the coast, was Old Stock. It was built, it's the oldest building in Biddeford Pool. I believe the oldest house in Biddeford is the Jordan House, which was built in 1717. But Old Stock opened as an inn in 1833. It had been built in approximately 1737. The Haley House was built in 1717. It was originally called the Mansion House. This is Stonecliff Road here, or is now Stonecliff Road. This is all part of the golf course. That cow is trespassing on the first fairway. Um, so it was known originally as the Mansion House, and then it was called Christopher Huzzy's Place. This was all Christopher Huzzy's land out here, what's now the golf course. Or Uncle Chris's place. Christopher Huzzy and his wife Eunice originally opened it, and then Christopher Huzzy Jr., who was married to Mary Goldthwait, who was known for her elegant seafood dishes. Weekly boarding, including meals in 1833, was $1.25. And what's one of the great things about these pictures, this is another picture from Gleanings from the Sea, by the way. This is the herring fleet that used to come into Biddeford Pool. I believe these coastal schooners ran up and down the coast, herring seining, wherever the herring were, they were there, and they were clearly in Biddeford Pool when these photos were taken. There's another picture we'll get to later that shows another part of the fleet in the harbor. I think these pictures were all taken around the same time, so the fleet must have been just enormous, and it must have smelled amazing. Mrs. Huzzy was known to declare, when you paid your bill for $1.25 for the week, she was known to declare, if he thinks it too much, he may take some off. It was last listed as a business in 1939. I've got a lot of pictures of it I need to scroll through. So here are a bunch of ladies in front of old stock before the Mansion House was built, because the Mansion House is right here, obviously getting ready to play some golf. Here it is. This one says Old Stock Tea Room, or you can't see it, but that's what it was in the early 1900s. Actually, this one says Old Stock Tea Room. And my father remembered being sent there for dinner to eat with the chauffeurs. Next one down the line is Christopher's Pasture, which is the house just after Union Church if you're going down Stoneforth Road. So here's Union Church. Christopher's Pasture was run by built by Mary Huzzy, named in memory of her late husband, Christopher Huzzy Sr., although he never lived there. It was run as a boarding house by Mary and then by her children, Sarah and Jane Huzzy, and we'll get back to them in a minute. But it was later used as the first clubhouse of the Abenaki Club. It's now a private residence. And it looks very much the same. The only difference really is it doesn't have a roof over the front porch, but otherwise it's pretty much identical. So I'm going to just go back to that picture again. So here's Old Stock, and here's Christopher Huzzy, Christopher's Pasture House. And then I believe we're going to come to the Mansion House, which is right here. That's the before and after. So here it is without the Abenaki Clubhouse. Here it is with the Abenaki Clubhouse. So now we're after 1905. You can see the CU wing up there. And here are a few folks out in front of both buildings. Here's the Mansion House, here's Christopher's Pasture, and here's Old Stock. And again, from across the tennis courts, Old Stock, Mansion House, Christopher's Pasture, water tower, from which some of the earlier pictures were taken. Most of the water in Biddeford Pool earlier came from the great pond next to the convent. It was pumped over these various water towers. There was something called the Biddeford Pool Water Company that managed the pipe system. So here is, again, Christopher's Pasture, and then this was the Mansion House that was built in 1886. It was built by the sisters Sarah and Jane Huzzy, who had run this, and their mother had built this. Sarah and Jane never married. They ran these inns all their lives. The rates in 1905 at the Mansion House were $10 to $12 a week, so inflation had definitely hit the area. After the deaths of Sarah and Jane, it was rented and then purchased by the CBUN owners. They paid $6,000 for it in 1914. They used it as an overflow for the CBUN. So the CBUN was the big hotel that you can see a little bit of back here. So it's sort of backed up to the Mansion House, and it became a very popular hotel. So its overflow guests ended up staying at the Mansion House for a while, and then sorry, jumping on me. It was eventually sold, as I said, for $6,000. 50 years after it opened, J.S. Locke on the shores of Saco Bay writes that the Huzzies were pioneers of the hotel business in Biddeford Pool. And here, lovers of nature can drink in the majesty of the ocean and at the hotels find intelligent and cultured companions. Gleanings to the Sea, Joseph Smith also writes similar accounts. He summered at the first mansion house, now known as Old Stock, with his family from the time he was a child of 8 years old until the early 1800s, until the mid-1800s. Smith writes that prior to 1840, there were only 13 families living in Biddeford Pool, with a population of about 75, but by 1880, when he wrote Gleanings from the Sea, there were 50 houses with a population of about 200. These 50 houses were likely all owned by locals because none of the summer people had houses. They all stayed at the various inns and hotels. Summer people didn't really start building houses or buying houses until after the hotel started closing. Yes?
A question. So the summer season, I don't know if you've gone over this yet, but the summer season was considered to be when to when, and for example, where did the help that came along with the summer, the people who stayed at the inns, did they also have lodging for their servants and their babysitters and all those people?
Yes. So the summer season, the summer season, my understanding is that it was shorter than it is now. It usually ended well before Labor Day. I mean, there were a lot of families in Biddeford Pool. I know a lot of families came from Cincinnati and St. Louis and places like that, and they would take a couple of days to get here by train. And they often wouldn't get here until, early July, maybe even the middle of July, and they all mostly went home by the middle to end of August. My understanding, Eve's family, my wife's family, ran the Ocean View Hotel for 50 years. The theory was, in general, the wives and the children and the servants would come up early in the season, and then the men would show up for the last 2 weeks of the year. But yes, they did bring servants, and I suppose, all the bigger hotels, the Seaview Inn and the Ocean View, certainly had wings for their help, up in the attic or back on one side or whatever, and I would assume that a lot of the servants also stayed there, but I don't know exactly. As I said, my father, who came with his parents and stayed at Eve's grandparents' hotel, remembered being sent to Old Stock to eat dinner with the chauffeurs. I don't know whether that was punishment or whether he thought it was fun, but I suspect it was more fun than eating with his parents. So that's sort of a non-answer, but I hope that helps a little bit. So, yeah.
You talked about population,
Yeah.
so non-hotels. Where are the houses though? The pictures I've seen are all hotels.
Yeah, well, most of,
Can you repeat the question?
where were the houses on Biddeford Pool? Where were the 50 houses or whatever? Mostly,
Hotels, but I don't see
Yeah.
any houses.
mostly there are the houses around the village. Most people live near the harbor because that's where they made their livelihood, especially in the non-summer season. It's a good question, and a lot of my pictures probably don't show very many houses because I'm showing the ends. I'll get to one that'll show some. Yeah, it's a good question, it's a fair question, but generally speaking, there were a handful of houses out around Ocean Avenue, a handful of houses, in sort of behind where St. Brendan's Church is, but the vast majority were in the village. Yates Street, Orchid Boulevard.
In where, around where the hotels are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, for instance, the Huzzy women that ran that big mansion house, did they live there in the wintertime, do you know, or did they have another house?
The Huzzies the Huzzies owned Old Stock until quite a bit later, and that house was certainly winterized, and they lived there. Whether the other two buildings were, I think Christopher's Pasture was winterized. I doubt if the Mansion House was. Mansion House was probably summer only. But I don't know definitively. But you're right. Actually, this is another one that shows nothing but an inn and a summer house. This is a little bit later because you can see some of the houses that started to be built on St. Martin's Lane. This is another summer. This house belonged to the guy who owned the inn. This picture is taken from the roof of the inn, of the Seaview Inn. This is Wood Island out here with woods, with trees,
Yeah.
magically. And these are the sisters, Sarah and Jane Huzzy, in front of the mansion house. You can see how close it was to old stock. This is just a railroad. This is from the Boston Maine Railroad 1910 schedule or advertising brochure, I guess, just giving an overview of some of these are the hotels at Biddeford Pool, the mansion house, the Seaview Inn, and their rates and so forth. Also, interestingly, here's some of the inns in Biddeford. They talk about the Curtis Farm Hotel, the Goose Rocks House. I have no idea what that was. Hotel Thatcher, back when it was a good and thriving concern, and the Riverside Cottage. I suspect I know where that was, but I'm not 100% sure. I think it was actually near here, sort of across from Sea Star, but I'm not positive.
A lot of the people, didn't they, arrived at the train station, and they were brought by a hack down to the base of White's Wharf, and then the S.E. Spring used to bring them down to Biddeford Pool, right?
Yep, I'll get to that. I'll show you some
Okay.
pictures. The spring and the Augusta used to
Yeah,
bring
'cause
them
the
down to
pool-
Biddeford Pool. They'd land on the wharf behind what's now Audie's house, or the lodge. And Eve's grandfather used to go pick him up in his buckboard with their trunks and so forth and bring him up to the hotel.
But the pool road was horrible.
Yeah.
It was a terrible road, and
Yeah.
a lot of times it was impassable, and so it was great just to take the ship down.
Yeah, the river was a much more efficient way of getting there, absolutely. So we are now going to go to, let's see, we're going to go to number 5 and 20, I believe, on your map, which is, and we're going to sort of stick around this neighborhood for a little while. So this is the old, what was known as the Ellsworth House. And she clearly wasn't into paparazzi at the time. It was built in around 1862 by Captain George Evans. Captain George Evans was Eve, my wife's great-grandfather. And Captain Evans, according to Joseph Smith, was a gracious host, and his success came from his kindness and his courteous mannerisms, just like his great-granddaughter. This was later known as the Evans Cottage. And Joseph Smith himself stayed here for many years. Joseph Smith owned old stock for a while, then he got hit with some financial problems, had to sell old stock, stayed at the Ellsworth House for quite a while with the Evans family. It was a neat old house. So this is on Orchid Boulevard. If you come up Miles Stretch Road to the stop sign and take a left, it's right there. This is our house right here, so this is our side yard. And then this is the Wagner House, which still exists, where the D of Fairfield Street comes up. There it is again, after a tree fell. Here's Joseph Smith on the front porch of this house. You can see Union Church in the background, and the Lilacs Cottage that's still there. Actually, these are all old cottages that were in existence back then that I'm quite sure belonged to year-rounders back in the day. They're now summer houses, but they weren't then. And there are a bunch more down this way. And this is the Evans Cottage or the Ellsworth House. So this is Orchid Boulevard. The fire barn is over here, so this is going up towards the village. This house is still there. This house was moved out to St. Martin's Lane by a team of oxen. This house is still there. This is just a little bit of a close-up of that. It was a beautiful old house. And then in 1948, in January, there was a terrible fire. This was the winter of 1947, excuse me. It was burned, it caught fire at night. There was an oil burning stove that was there. There was nobody home, but the oil burner caught fire. It was 26 degrees below zero that night. The fire, Norman Goldie told me that he was there fighting the fire and their boots froze in the ice. They had to leave them in the ice. The pumps froze. They couldn't get any water to the fire. It was a total disaster. So it was never rebuilt. It was just bulldozed into the ground. Sadly, what a beautiful old house. Here's another shot of the fire. You can see the icicles from the water that they did get onto it. So next one is number 20, I believe, on your map, which is actually our house, so I'm jumping around a little bit because I'm saving Marie Joseph for last. Normally I would put that in here now because the Evans family, after they ran this as an inn, they built what's now the convent, the Ocean View Hotel. After they sold the Ocean View Hotel, Mrs. Evans ran this as a B&B called the Grayley House, also known as Biddeford, although he doesn't remember that. It was run as a B&B from 1948 until 1982, when I came along and ruined everything. So it was also, Eve also ran it as a breakfast and lunch room. So anyway, between the Ellsworth House, the Ocean View Hotel, and this building, the Evans family was in the Biddeford Pool hospitality business for about 120 years. This is another shot of the front of it and the dining room. Well, that was the Red Ring, yeah. Well, it was a B&B then too, right? I always get corrected on that one. So this is the Holman House, and the Holman House is number 11, I believe, on your maps. So this is up on what a lot of people refer to as the Inn Lawn, which is a big field across the street from our house. The Holman House was built in about 1845. You can see that croquet was a thing back in the day. It grew and added over the years to hold, ultimately held about 125 guests. Daniel Holman was an interesting character. He was the one who built that place. He was a very religious man. He was one of the founders of Union Church in Biddeford Pool. He allowed no liquor in the Holman House. You couldn't check in or check out on Sunday. He owned the First National Bank of Biddeford, however. He was not above being a capitalist. He also fished, he also farmed. Guests at the Holman House included all of our Wendell homes. He died in 1878. His grandson, William Starkweather, took over and eventually demolished it, and he built this place, which was called the Highland House, which was by far the biggest hotel anywhere on the coast of Biddeford, probably anywhere in Biddeford, I don't know, maybe until Lincoln was built. 300 rooms. No, excuse me, 300 guests, probably 150 rooms. I only have one picture of a part of it, but I'll show you. So this is going to be hard to follow, but if you come up Orchid Boulevard, which is over here, to the intersection, excuse me, if you come up Mile Stretch Road over here to the intersection of Orchid Boulevard, which is behind this building, this is the Colgate Condominium House, which was the old Colgate family house. Behind that is the Highland House. And you can see it's a massive structure. So if you come up there now, you'll see it's a vacant lot. And this must have absolutely filled that lot. I'll give you a slight blow-up of it. You can see it was just gigantic. Every time I dig a hole to plant a bush in our yard, I dig up salt shakers or molten glass or something like that. The Highland House was built in 1879. In 1882, it burned down after 3 seasons. Must have been an amazing fire.
And what was the source of those fires that would happen like that?
I mean, a couple of them I know. There was one that was an exploding gas lamp. The Ellsworth House was an oil burner fire. You know, they were burning oil to light the places. They were burning coal to heat the places. You know, smoking. Everybody smoked back in the day.
And they were all stick built.
And they were all stick built. They were all just fire traps. Absolutely. Yeah. So this is Orchid Boulevard, right at the intersection of Mile Stretch Road, which comes in here. This is the sign for the inn. These two houses are still there. This is going down to where the fire station is down here. So we're going to do the CVU Inn now. This is a shot you saw earlier, coming up Mile Stretch Road to that intersection. There is an earlier version of the CVU Inn, which earlier was called the Ocean House. The original piece was built in 1847. John Hussey, who was the son of Christopher Hussey Sr., was born at the first mansion house He built that, he eventually sold it to Frederick Turner Brown in 1879. Wright Emmons, who was Wade Goldthwaite's grandfather, built the addition in here. And you can see that this building, you'll see it in a lot of different slides, but this building is a mashup of at least 3 different buildings. There's a mansard roof structure here, there's a gable roof structure here, there's a little salt box house tucked in the corner here. And in every iteration, all these pieces survived, they just kept getting added onto as time went on. Here's another sort of fuzzy picture of it. They put a water tower in the middle of it, so you had good water pressure. This woman is coming out of the toll gate house. This is Orchid Boulevard, and Mile Stretch Road came in right about here. There it is again, rather inhospitable. But you can see the mansard structure, the gable structure, and then the little salt box. And they'll just keep showing up as time goes on. Here it is this woman is standing across the street from the fire station. So you're looking up the hill going toward the village. Again, you can see the back of the mansard. This was, the front of the building back then was here. This is the porch, and the driveway went up in front of that. You'd walk down those steps and you could walk down the path toward the golf course. Another shot from more or less the same place. Here's the old fire station that was replaced in 1964. And there it is with the water tower. This cottage is still there. There's our house right there.
Is that Holtz's place?
Holtz's place? No, Holtz is down behind the fire station.
Oh, okay.
This was Joan Kittredge, Martha Rowley's house now. So this is looking from where First Street comes into Orchid Boulevard. And you can see this is the CV wing here. Here's Union Church. Here's Old Stock. This is the Colgate condominium house here. Just another old shop from Queens from the Sea. And this is a little bit more modern. This is from the back side of it. So this was the dining room. This was the front of the building, and this was the main driveway going up to it. So it originally opened this version of it opened in 1881. There was another renovation just before the war, which I'll get to in a minute, but here's this beautiful structure, even though it was sort of a mashup of things. So this is Clint and Becky Marshall's house back here, if you know them. There it is. This is taken from Marie Jo, basically, showing the back of it, or the front of it, excuse me. Long view of the same shot. So here's Union Church. Here's the mansion house back here, and here's the CBU Inn up here. Same sort of shot. Okay, so in 1940 or thereabouts, they built this facade in front of it. So all of a sudden it became this beautiful gambrel building, very classic main inn sort of a thing. But you can see the old mansard piece of it is still tucked back in there. So it became quite a large structure after that. This was the brochure from the opening in 1940. They had Kenneth Roberts write the blurb for the brochure, touting how beautiful it was. They did have I remember going to the Thursday night dinner there. They had a buffet Thursday nights and Sunday nights, and these guys would grill lobsters and carve roast beef. It was quite an elegant place. Most of the rooms had bathrooms down the hall. There were a few ensuite rooms. There's actually a room layout in the back there if you want to have a look at it later. Guests had to use the Abenaki Club for golf and tennis. By 1960 or so, it was owned by a consortium of summer people. You can see here's that little salt box. So here's the new addition from 1940. Here's that little salt box that was tucked in there, and here's the gable end of it, and the mansard part of it is still in the back of it. This shot may show a few of it. Well, this is later, so this is after 1940, obviously. Here's the whole structure now. You can see the newer part, the older salt box and so forth. And then a lot of these cottages going down Bayview and Stable Street were owned by the locals back in the day, and also so a lot of these cottages going out this way. So anyway, it was owned by a consortium of summer people by the 1960s. and they sort of ran it very inefficiently. Mostly as a guest house for their friends. It was, you know, rarely full, and it was losing money. They were putting money into it every year. This is an interesting picture just because somebody's moving a giant water tank onto or off of Biddeford Pool. I have no idea what's going on there, but it must have been quite an adventure. The brochures, on the room layouts, this stuff is all in the back. Rate schedule. Yeah, room for two for the day at that point was $30 a day, so it was pretty pricey. Dinner parties happen there. So if you know where the big flagpole is in Biddeford Pool, that's it right there. There's just nothing behind it anymore.
How did that go? Fire?
No, I'll show you. This is about the last picture I have of it from the 60s. In 1964, they tore it down. Anybody remember Lucian Bork?
Yeah.
He was the guy who tore it down. Yeah, so they had just reshingled the building. The state fire marshal said they had to put a sprinkler system in. It was going to cost $20,000. And they said, no, that's enough. So make it go away. So they did. That was the end of that. So now we're going to go down Orchid Boulevard toward the village to the Sokoke Inn, which is number 15 on your map, which you might recognize as being Winter Harbor condominiums. This is going down Orchid Boulevard toward the gut, but 2-3 buildings just before Eppo Goldthwaite's store. This was an inn. I don't know much about it. It was run as an inn from about 1930 to about 1942. The Adi family ran it for a while. The Adi family that owned the lodge, the B&B that's right in the gut down there. I only know that because John Adi gave me the sign for the Winter Harbor. They called it the Winter Harbor Inn at the time. Here it is again with the barn addition. Beautiful building, still is a beautiful building. Then we're going down to the corner where, Orchid Boulevard loops around and connects into Yates Street to the Yates House, which is another one that you would never think it was there. This was known at various times as the Cutts House, the Bryant House, and the Yates House, originally built in 1844. So this is in the village, right across from Adi's Lodge. So if you know where my office is, Ocean View Properties is right there, and Eppo Goldthwaite's is right over here across the street. And the post office is right up behind here. So it was a very big building. Let's see, do I know? Familiar names who ran it and or owned it are Colonel Thomas Cutts, Moses Hill, Isaac Bickford, and then Fred Yates, after whom Yates Street was named. He owned it in 1962. Fred Yates also ran the CVU Inn at some point, and he also ran the Thatcher Hotel at some point. So he was pretty accomplished innkeeper. 4 to 5 stories, 150 guests, an ad from, I'll show you a picture of it. So this is it with a lot of folks hanging around. So, the summer population was huge. Or maybe this is where the servants stayed. I don't know. Although actually, judging by this, they were certainly trying to get stronger trade than that. So this is an ad from 1879. The Yates House has during the present season been renovated, refitted, refurnished, and put in first-class order, thereby making it second to none on the coast of Maine. It will reopen for the reception of guests on July 1st, to answer the question about when the season opened. Appreciating the fact that the public now demands low rates for seaside board, the proprietor has placed his prices at the low figure of $8 and $10 weekly. An orchestra has been engaged for the season, and numerous other attractions have been added, which will combine to make the summer of 1879 more enjoyable than that of any preceding season. For boating, bathing, gunning, and fishing, it's unsurpassed. Parties requiring a quiet yet delightful resort will find Biddeford Pool will find the pool just such a place as will suit them. being free from the noise and confusion of steam cars, fast driving, and boisterous crowds of people, like that of late infest our other popular summer resorts. This is 1879. The prevailing winds are southwesterly during the summer months and are very soft and mild, being particularly desirable for invalids.
Wow.
From the Yates House, an unobstructed view is had of the grand old ocean, as well as the vast experience of green landscape and waving forest. Old Orchard Beach, along also with its many hotels, may be plainly seen. Biddeford may be reached by either the Boston and Maine or Eastern railroads. The steamer Augusta makes 2 trips daily from the cities to the pool, leaving Factory Island Wharf at 9:30 a.m. and 2 p.m., landing within a few rods of the Yates House. Here, a few more shots of Yates House, and some people enjoying the recreation thereof. Yeah, this is looking down Orchid Boulevard toward the gut. Yates House is back over here. Ethel Goldthwait store is here. People having a picnic, I guess, or I don't know what they're doing. This is another shot. This is actually taken from the Evans house, or the Ellsworth house. So here's the Yates Hotel. Here's the herring fleet in the pool. This is taken at about the same time as that shot that showed the herring fleet out in the harbor. So you can imagine how massive that was. This here is the Cut store. Was more or less where the Ottie's B&B is. This is the building that the British sacked in the War of 1812 and 1814. The British invaded Biddeford Pool, came in, burned several ships in the harbor, and stole all the rum from the Cut store, which was pretty disastrous.
But that building's still there, right?
This building?
Yeah.
No,
No?
no. There's another.
What it looks like?
The B&B is there. I'll show you a picture of it in a while. But no, it's gone. Here is the steamer, Augusta, at the wharf. So this is basically Wazzati's wharf, or the yacht club wharf right in here. Big ship coming in.
Yeah.
Imagine turning that thing around in there. Anyway, here's the Yates House. Here's Cut's store. You can see it's a pretty big building. And then Ethel Goldthwait's is right here. A different version of Ethel Goldthwait's is that house. That building burned down in 1953, or partially burned in 1953. Let's see. So here it is without the steamer. Again, here's the Cut store. Here's the Yates House. And looking up the hill, here's Ethel Goldthwait's right here. This is taken from Hills Beach, obviously, right across the gut. Let's see here. All right, skip it. Yeah, so on June 15th, 1884, the Yates House was lost to fire, along with several other houses, and the Huzzy store across the street, and one of the bowling alleys that used to be back behind here. Fred Yates, who was the proprietor at the time, one of the cooks, a hotel steward, and several guests managed to escape the house through a window over a piazza roof and then drop to the ground. So it burned down. So this little building there's still a little piece of this building in my office at Ocean View Properties. This was the fish market at the time. It was the H.L. Curtis store, and then it became Millgate Bunker, and then Crowley's, and then the Fletcher's Neck Lobster Counter, and then Innis Lobster, and then Pool Lobster Company, and then Ocean View Properties. Here's the other steamer coming in the spring, coming in the gut. These side wheel steamers, pretty impressive, bringing folks into the pool. This is the ferry landing with the Goldenrod and the Nimrod also used to run up and down the river, smaller launches that bar people into the pool. You can see the monument on Monument Island back here, back when it was painted white.
Yeah.
So here is this is, I think I showed you this picture once before. Here's a blow up of the Cut store. And then here we go, and there's nothing there. You can see the Yates House is gone, Cut store is gone, my office, or the fish market's gotten a little bit bigger. You can see the Fisherman's Wharf over here. And then lots of cottages and local folks' houses down on Yates Street and going up this way. Just a little bit of a blow up of the same view. And then jumping way, way ahead of time, here's the same neck of the woods. So here is Audie's B&B, the lodge guest house. So this is basically where Cut's store was. Here's the lobster pound. Basically, the Yates house was filling up this piece of real estate right here. So this is the road to the Fisherman's Wharf and the yacht club right here, and we've got right here an Ethel Goldthwaite's as it looks today right here. So this is the lodge, which was run as a B&B from 1966 to 2015. Dorothy Oddie and then her son John Oddie ran it. This actually was the last lodging in Biddeford Pool open to the public. It closed when John Oddie passed away. And now the family still owns it, but they rent it as a house, not as an inn. We're going to go up to up Yates Street a little bit here to, actually I don't think there's no number on your map. We're going to go up Yates Street to, oh it is here, number 16, sorry, to Ye Olde Homestead, also known as Crowley's Inn. Ye Olde Homestead was an inn and it sold shore dinners. If anybody remembers Hattie's Deli, Hattie was Harriet Crowley. She was Vicki Goodwin's grandmother, and she ran this. These were her shore dinners. There's Hattie on the cover of the menu for Hattie's Deli. So Hattie ran it, and then Fred Tarbox ran it for a while. An ad in the Biddeford Directory in the mid-1900s called it clean, quiet, comfortable, and home-like rooms with good cooking. What more do you want? Going out, now I'm really skipping around and getting near the end here, but going way out Orchid Boulevard, this is now an apartment house. It was the Seahawk Hotel. Garnet Colpitts owns it now and it's converted into apartments, but it was motel units, excuse me. That was the first apartment I ever rented right there. But I don't know much else about it. I asked Garnet for information and he didn't have any. He purchased it in 1967 and it's been an apartment house ever since then. So finally we're going to go to the Evans House or the Ocean View Hotel, which is this guy. This was built in 1895 by Horace Evans. Horace Evans was the son of Captain George Evans, and he was the brother of Henry Evans, who was his grandfather. Horace ran it for 16 years, I think, and then he sold it to his brother Henry. Horace, I think, had financial problems. We have copies. Every year he ended up mortgaging the place to his brother or mortgaging the cutlery and the furniture to his brother to make ends meet. You can see when he ran it, it was called the Evans Hotel. And this was the grand opening, I believe, in 1895. So this was a place where mothers and maids came from the summers with their steamer trunks and so forth, and then the gentleman would arrive later in the year and join them for the last part of the summer. The opening brochure when Henry Evans bought it, this is Henry as sketched by James Montgomery Flagg. The opening brochure when he bought it, and he had added some of these piazzas and so forth, and actually added a wing on the side at some point. The brochure says the Ocean View Hotel at Biddeford Pool has accommodations for 100 guests. It is most favorably located on an elevation within 200 yards of the ocean, affording a grand view of the surrounding country, ocean, and bay, the White Mountains forming a beautiful background. The chambers are all large outside rooms arranged both single and en suite, and are perfectly ventilated, beautifully tinted in soft, light colors. The beds are double and are supplied with the finest pearl hair mattresses and woven springs. The sanitation is perfect, modern toilets and baths having been installed. Fire escapes are located at each end of the corridors, and chemical fire extinguishers are on each floor. And amazingly enough, this one didn't burn down. The grounds, which include one of the finest bathing beaches on the Atlantic coast, comprise nearly 8 acres and contain a most wonderful freshwater pond within 200 yards of the ocean, a spring of absolutely pure mineral water which supplies the hotel. The dining room is large, light, and airy. I should show you some more of these pictures as I go through this. There it is. This wing was built later on after Henry acquired it. This is on the west end of the building. Got lots of views of this. I won't bore you with all of them forever here. This is it from the beach. The dining room is large, light, and airy. Its beautifully tinted walls, its polished floor, its well-laid tables make it a room in which all delight to dine. And I have a couple of the menus in the back too, where you can have a look at it if you'd like. By being supplied direct from the farms and with garden and dairy produce, farm to table, and from the ocean and the seafoods, the proprietor has established a reputation for serving the best food. The fishing and gunning at the pool is a delight of sportsmen. Off the rocks with rod and reel, small fish are caught in abundance, while offshore you may enjoy the most exciting deep sea fishing. And if you do happen to read Gleanings from the Sea sometime, you'll note that they used to catch swordfish off the Biddeford Pool in abundance, which is just amazing to think about. You're eligible for membership at the golf links of the nearby Abenaki Club. That, combined with surf bathing, yachting, rowing, canoeing, and the opportunity for beautiful walks or rides into the country and along the shore, furnish outdoor amusement and recreation for everybody. One of the many resorts on the beautiful coast of Maine, none is more favored by nature than Biddeford Pool. Located on a peninsula, its grandeur of scenery, its cool, pure air, excellent beach, and peaceful waters make it a resort where mind and body find invigoration and inspiration. Postcard from Mrs. Evans' time. So Henry Evans died in 1936, I believe, and his wife Florence, who was born in the borders of Scotland, ran the hotel from the time of his death until after the war in 1948, when she couldn't find help. There it is from the beach with the bathhouses in the foreground. Again from the beach. One of the brochures. Pretty sure this picture of the dining room is from after it had been a girls' school, because it doesn't have the beautifully polished floors anymore. It looks a little more institutional. Brochure with a room layout, a couple of the menus. They also provided a great deal of entertainment at night. They had color motion pictures. They had Bertram Davis respectfully informs the nobility and gentry and other guests of this hotel that this very night he will delight the discriminating and captivate the critical with his baffling demonstration of the art of magic. And also Bruce the magician and his deluxe magical review. And here it is in his later years. And then in 1948, Mrs. Evans could no longer manage it. So after the war, she had a terrible time getting help. Very familiar problem to us today, as many of the GIs came home and went to school on GI Bill and no longer wanted to work summers in this place. So she worked her fingers to the bone for a number of years, and then finally in 1948, she sold it to the Sisters of the Presentation of Mary. And they ran it for, well, the Evans family ran it for about 50 years, for exactly 50 years. The sisters ran it for another 75 years. In 1975, they were thinking about selling it, and the state was thinking about buying it to create a state park there, but that never happened. But as we probably all know, this spring, the hammer did come down and it is being sold, and it's going to be torn down. It's an amazing building and losing the nuns is an amazing loss to the community. They've just been wonderful, wonderful neighbors, a wonderful spiritual presence to the community. But they they were facing about $1 million in renovations that the city was going to require them to institute almost immediately. Their average age in the convent was over 80. They couldn't find help, same thing that Mrs. Evans faced. So they decided to sell, and they decided that they wanted to negotiate with the Biddeford Pool Land Trust primarily if the Biddeford Pool Land Trust would promise them that the land would be conserved, that it would not be developed in any way. And so that is what's happening. It is being sold to the Biddeford Pool Land Trust. They're in the process of trying to raise the dollars to make it happen. It's supposed to close in September, at the end of September. And then in October, if you look at these two pictures, here's the before and here's the after. This is exactly the same angle. You can see the pond. This tree exists behind the building. So here's what it looks like today, and here's what it will look like in the future. The Land Trust intends to let it go wild. There'll be a path to the beach, and otherwise it will be planted with natural indigenous plants and maintained as a refuge, if you will. And that is the end of that. I urge you all to make donations to the Biddeford Historical Society. Thank you.
We have a question over here.
Oh, yeah.
Just to follow that last piece that you did, so where are things now with the land trust and the raising of the funds?
The Land Trust to date has raised about $9.3 million. The purchase price is $9 million. The cost to demolish the building and remove all the pavement and asbestos and all that good stuff is about $1 million. And the estimated cost to reclaim the land and put it back to a natural state and preserve it is, with an endowment, is probably another $1 million. So we are looking to raise about $11 million. We're getting there. So as anybody who's been involved in fundraising knows, the last mile is the hardest mile.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Can I do it again? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sure.
I'm specific. You're at our house, and I got really into this whole thing recently. So I'm interested in what kind of data are out there on the people who actually resided in these inns. Was all of that lost in fires and everything, or is there information out there through the Historical Society?
There's a guy in Biddeford Pool who owns the house that used to belong to the guy who owned the CVU Inn. And he has guest registers for the CVU Inn for decades, I believe. I've looked at them. I don't have them, but the data is there of who they were, where they came from, that sort of thing. Also, the Abenaki Club has guest registers because when people stayed at the CVU Inn or stayed at the Ocean View Hotel, they could become members of the Abenaki Club, and so their names were entered into the rolls and quite often you would see they had to have someone who somebody who put them up for membership.
Sure.
And if you saw Henry Evans as the person who put them up for membership, it was because they came from the Ocean View Hotel. If you saw Turner Brown putting them up for membership, then you know they came from the CVU Inn. So that data is there in its very raw state. If you're really interested, I can maybe figure out some way to borrow those registers.
I'm curious. I'm actually interested in the people who worked for it.
Oh, who worked there?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, because they work for families.
Yeah.
Just like.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even I know a few people who worked at the Ocean View Hotel.
Yeah.
You know, the people who came and worked with the families. I know the names of some of them, and I know where some of them came from, but I don't know much about them.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm rather interested in what vehicles have been used for advertising. Did they advertise in the Biddeford Street directories at that time?
The Biddeford directories, I guess you'd say they advertised there because they had entries in the Biddeford directories, many of them did. A lot of this information came from Biddeford directories, but they also had these brochures, and I don't know whether they mailed them out, whether they I'm not quite sure. I mean, we have several of them in the back. I don't know exactly how they disseminated the information. It wasn't on the internet. Beyond that, I just don't know. You know, I've never seen a magazine ad for any of these places. So I don't know. It's a good question.
We did have a Chamber of Commerce, didn't we?
Maybe not. I don't know.
I know one of the places that you used to be able to pick up bags were from in the railroad stations.
Oh, good point. Oh,
Yeah.
that's exactly. In fact, I showed a slide of the Boston Maine Railroad guide from 1910, and that's in the back there too. And you can see that they had a lot of information about the hotels and who ran them, and probably addresses and so forth. So yeah, that would have been actually the railroads were probably
Yeah.
key source of information.
They didn't have the planes.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I know it's getting on the late side, but can you go back to the discussion about how people move from the railway station?
Yeah.
Go back to that story.
Sure.
Read.
Well, the railroad was cut almost purposely for the textile mills. And when, that was in the 1840s. And when the textiles that were being produced from the cotton that was coming up from the south, that was being sent out to the world as purple sheets and all of that. It's supposed to be the finest cotton fabric in the world. The managers and the elite people in the mills were moving up here into some of the bigger houses in Biddeford. They're still there today. And then they were some of the first people that came out here to the pool as they were recreationists. And eventually what they did is, it's interesting though, because this is pre-Civil War, but post-Civil War it explodes. There's just all of this movement in the country, and there's a recreationist movement within the country. Other than just moving out there for work as a farmer or a fisherman, you know, they were dock workers and so forth. These were people who just come in here for the purpose of recreation, and that really didn't happen until after the Civil War. Then when that took place, the means by which was they would literally come up by railroad a lot of times the men who were in management and other businesses, not necessarily in the textile industry, they would send their wives and their kids up here to the railroad station in Biddeford, and there'd be a hackman that would pick them up by horse and bring them down Main Street, down to White's Wharf, and then the S.E. Spring or Prentice would bring them all the way down to the pool. Like you said, moving that ship around in that little gut was been amazing. And that's it. I mean, they would have, what? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, sideward, that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Just
But-
forward one and reverse the other, and left or uncle, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what it worked for. So those were all a little satellite industries, you know, that worked. And there were a whole bunch of other things that people did, you know, with it. But
A lot of the early summer people were known as rusticators, and they came down here because they wanted something rustic. They wanted quiet. They didn't want the city nonsense, the steam cars and all the nonsense. But yeah.
any other questions? I just want to remind you that, thank you so much, my friend.
Yeah.
We have a